What a way to start the season. The Montreal Canadiens lose 5-4 in overtime to the Toronto Maple Leafs in their season opener, but there is so much we have to get through. We'll get to the game and more on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. My name is Julian McKenzie, and joining me today are the usual suspects: Montreal Gazette columnist Stu Cowan, Jessica Rusnak of CBC Daybreak Montreal, and former Canadiens defenseman and NHL assistant coach Rick Green. Good to have you all on this week's episode. We have a lot to get to with the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Wednesday, so let's just jump right into it. We know the Canadiens lost in overtime. I still think there were plenty of positives and maybe some negatives to get to as well. What were your main takeaways from Wednesday night's game against the Leafs?
That was one hell of a hockey game, wasn't it? That was so entertaining. I mean, these guys hadn't played a game in 4 months. They dropped the puck. They went 5 minutes before the first faceoff, just up and down. It was just a great hockey game. I mean, Canadiens fans can, obviously going to be upset that they lost in overtime. But, it was Josh Anderson, 2 goals, one more than he had all last season with Columbus. Romanov looked great on the blue line. Suzuki, they got 2 power play goals. I mean, there were so many positives to take away from it. And the biggest positive was just it was so entertaining. Canadiens fans have gone through so many years of boring hockey. And, for people shut in at home because of the COVID curfew, I mean, that was a fun night. That was just a lot of fun to watch.
And talk about watching boring hockey with the Canadiens, but how long has this rivalry between the Habs and Leafs been a boring rivalry? And I think for most part, that's why people prefer the Boston-Montreal one. But the game on Wednesday was a really entertaining game. It was the kind of game you wanted to see between two rivals. And the biggest takeaway is that the positives outweigh the negatives. Yeah, they allowed their 3-1 lead to go after taking some penalties. But in the end, this is going to be a learning experience. It's not as long as a season as before, but this is something that they can build off of. And it was a really impressive start for the Montreal Canadiens, in my opinion.
Yeah, and what a start to the season. I mean, let's look forward to another 9 games, these guys playing against each other. I mean, you have to give them full marks. The tempo and, the way that they were able to handle themselves so early on in the start of this season was quite impressive. And, you look down the lineup from both sides and you see both were very, very competitive. Both teams were entertaining, as Stu had said, and it was fun to watch. So, I mean, I'm very impressed with how the Canadiens were able to go toe to toe with the Leafs with that type of firepower. Unfortunately, they came up short in the overtime.
And as you mentioned, Rick, 9 more games of these teams together. It's hard to me. I think the Leafs once played in the Western Conference in the NHL. It's going to be great to see these guys play each other so many times.
Can we just get something out the way from this game here? There seems to be this debate growing over whether or not the Toronto Maple Leafs truly changed the game off of a fight that occurred between Wayne Simmonds and Ben Chiarot. Can we? Where do you guys stand on that? Is it the fight that changed everything, or is it the penalties that changed everything? I think it's the penalties, but I want to hear what you guys think.
Well, the penalties, the 2 penalties late in the period. I mean, the Canadiens were up 3-1. They took 2 penalties, 2 power play goals. The penalty kill was brutal last year. It's bad again. The power play looks better. I mean, Rick could speak better to this as a former player. I mean, Wayne Simmonds obviously went out there to fire up his players. After the fight, he raised his hands like they do in a video game to his bench to fire them up. He gave the thumbs up to Ben Chiarot in the penalty box, thanking him for taking the fight. So it doesn't matter, I don't think, what us in the media say or what fans say. It's what the players think. And I think NHL players to this point, even today, still think that fires them up. So that's their take on it, and they're the only ones that really count, I guess.
And I think Wayne Simmonds, that's been kind of his role for his whole career, and he picked his spot well, and made a statement that, hey, listen, nobody's going to mess around with it. He challenged Chiarot. He basically had no choice other than to fight him. Whether or not that had a huge effect on the momentum, I'm not sure, other than making a statement that said, Toronto Maple Leafs are not going to be pushed around. We can play any type of game. And, Wayne did his part in standing up and, making a statement.
Julian, I agree with you. I don't necessarily think the fight was what changed the momentum for the Leafs. I think they just took advantage of having two back-to-back power plays, and that's really what it was. But you have to say, for Wayne Simmonds in the fight with Ben Chiarot, it was a classy fight, if that's even a way to put it, was that, you know, he didn't go after Ben Chiarot when he was down. He knew he already won the fight. He didn't have any dirty shots with it. It was one of those respectable fights. So I think that was a bright spot too when it comes to hockey, where a lot of people don't necessarily like the fighting in it, but sometimes it has to happen, and it was done in a respectful manner.
More of a turning point for the Leafs, not just the game, but Wayne Simmonds is a reason he's effective in front of the net, because people are hesitant to cross-check him or beat up like Ben Chiarot did, because that's what happened. So, you know, the Leafs have been considered a soft team and weak for a while. That's why they went out and got Wayne Simmonds. I mean, I grew up in the days of rock'em sock'em hockey and, you know, loving fighting. I think fighting should be on its way out, but it's still part of the game, and it's still in a coach's toolbox or a player's toolbox. And Wayne Simmonds used it last on Wednesday night.
And judging by, you know, some of the cross checks that went down also on Matthews, it looked like the referees, at least in this particular game, were allowing that part of the game to go on, because, you know, there were some pretty good hacks going on in that game that they basically let go. And I thought, oh boy, this looks like something back in the 70s and 80s. But, you know, hats off to those two guys that did what they had to do. They stood up and, you know, both represented their teams well.
I've said it before. I think Shea Weber gets a pass on cross-checking. You think you could call about 10 cross-checks?
Yeah, I'm sure Matthews has some ice on his back today, because it was a good one. But anyways, life in the hockey business.
You never did that, eh, Rick?
No, never. No.
Yeah, I think even Ben Chiarot too. I mean, we all remember the fight, but I think, didn't he take a puck off the ribs as well? There's a lot of guys who are going to be feeling sore after Wednesday night's game. And I mean, I tell you what, I really enjoyed the fact that the referees kind of let them go, even though depending on which side of the fan base you're on, they may feel the referees may have let the calls go for the other team here and there. I didn't write down a question for Josh Anderson, but I think we should talk about him very briefly. This is a guy who scored 2 goals in his in his Montreal Canadiens debut with, you know, obviously playing Wednesday night's game, and he doubled his output from last year. We all know about his shoulder surgery and all that, but he scored one goal last year with the Columbus Blue Jackets. He scores twice on Wednesday. He got that nice goal in the slot for his first one. His second one, he drives to the net with John Tavares in his dust. What did you guys think of Josh Anderson in his debut on Wednesday?
To me, looking at, you know, his speed with his size, the way he overpowers guys and gets to the net, huge bonus for the team. I mean, this guy, you know, even his first goal that he released was a great shot, quick shot, and man, oh man, if he continues obviously on this pace, playing that way, he's going to make a big impact obviously on the team. And, you know, again, he has to take full credit, because he was facing, you know, probably quite a bit of conversation in his contract talks and the amounts that they're going to pay him. And I'm sure he was quite nervous before the game, but he responded in a great way, and nothing but positives to say moving forward with a guy like this.
Yeah, watching the game, I was like, who are these guys in the Habs uniforms? Who are all these big guys? And
I saw that tweet.
Josh Anderson, I mean, as Rick said, you know, that when he blew around the wing there and cut to the net, that's Josh Anderson. And the other goal was like one of those video game goals. You know, my son kicks my butt all the time playing NHL video games, and I know that sound with that ping off the post when it goes in. I know that sound very well, and that was one of those goals. And, you know, Josh Anderson has something to prove, as Rick said. You know, he had 27 goals a year before, I believe it was, with Columbus 2 seasons ago. Last season, he tried to play through that shoulder injury, 1 goal. He has something to prove this season. He wants to prove that he is the power forward that Marc Bergevin believes he is, and Marc Bergevin put his banking on that. You know, Marc Bergevin said the other day there's maybe 5 players in the NHL who play like Josh Anderson, and we saw that style on Wednesday night.
And also throughout training camp, we've seen just how good he's been so far. And he's been one of the players that people have been talking about a lot, his speed and just how well he looks because of that shoulder injury. And there was question marks if he will actually be able to play to the level that we've seen in the past. And this was a big night for him. He wanted to prove something. And also he grew up in Burlington, Ontario, just outside of Toronto. So a lot of family members and friends tuning into this game to see how he would do. So he wanted to show a larger audience than maybe he won't get when they face Edmonton or Vancouver, what he can do. And I think this is just great for the confidence of Josh Anderson going forward.
Let's move on to my next question here. A lot of pundits have already provided their opinions on who will make the playoffs in the North Division, who's going to win the North Division, who's going to go to the Stanley Cup final. Personally, I think Colorado's going to go this year and win. I picked them last year. Hopefully they do it again this year to make my prediction come true. Of course, a lot of people might want the Montreal Canadiens to do well. I haven't seen a lot of them pick the Canadiens to win the Stanley Cup, though. We've seen a few say that they'll make the playoffs in the North Division, but not necessarily that they'll make the Stanley Cup final. What do the Canadiens need to be taken seriously as a cup contending team?
I think they're missing that game breaker player. They have depth right now. You mentioned Colorado. Colorado has Nathan McKinnon, game breaker. You look at Tampa Bay winning last season. Now they have more than one game breaker on that team. I think that's what they're missing. But having said that, I picked the Canadiens to finish third in the Canadian division this season, but I also picked them to win the division in the postseason, just because I think that depth they have and that scoring depth. Carey Price will have to play better than he did against the Leafs in the opening. It wasn't his fault, but still 5 goals. So I think they just don't have the game breaker that some of the other teams in the NHL do, and I think you need that in the playoffs to win the Stanley Cup.
I think also they're missing still that veteran center that has been there before and has gone far in the playoffs. Obviously, that's something easier said than done. It's difficult to find, but that could also be kind of that game-changing player that Stu was talking about. And I think also the experience. Just look how much more confident they are this year after what happened in the bubble over the summertime. And that was, a very small experience. They beat the Pittsburgh Penguins in the play-in round. They went to the first round. But I think if they can go far and gain that experience, then maybe next year when the season starts, the Canadiens might be looked at a little bit differently. And maybe it might be easier to attract some free agents or find a way to make a trade and have players waive their no trade clause. If they have that, that could help them in the future to get some of those players.
And I think, like every team, you need a real sniper, a guy that can make the difference in those close games. And, hopefully some of the guys that they have will step it up and, produce offensively. But it would be a real bonus if they were able to find a guy that, okay, close game, all of a sudden, like usual, our sniper came through at the right time and, made the difference between a tie or a win.
And Josh Anderson showed in the season opener, maybe he can be that game-breaking scorer that they need. Who knows? We'll see as the season goes forward.
We'll have to see, but you make a really good point about a game breaker, right? Like you look to Toronto, they have Mitch Marner and they have Austin Matthews. You look at Edmonton, they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. You look to Vancouver, they have Elias Pettersson, and even though he's on defense, Quinn Hughes. But Brock Besser also played well on Wednesday night. The Montreal Canadiens, in fact, they made so many moves this offseason, but they still don't really have a guy who you consider maybe like a top 50 skater. How much does that kind of weigh on their status as people kind of see them not necessarily as a true cup contender?
Well, it's incredible when you think, the last Canadiens player to finish in the top 10 in NHL scoring was Mats Naslund in 1986 when he was playing with Rick. So it's remarkable to think, the Flying Frenchmen have not had anybody who that game breaker in such a long time. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think you need that when you get into the playoffs, and you need that guy that you can count on, that you just know. No matter how tight they check him, no matter how much they hit him, no matter what they do, this guy's going to produce and he's going to score. And, you look at Steven Stamkos, for example, last year. I mean, he was hurt badly. He came out, he played one shift, and he scored. And then he couldn't play again. He was hurt. That's the Canadiens haven't had that guy forever. Well, they had a lot of them back, in the glory days, but they haven't had one since.
But a lot of times too, that one game that Steven Stamkos played, it just fired up the team so much. So that's the other thing too, that could help the trickle down effect by knowing that this guy's going to go out there, he's going to score a goal to get you back into the game or maybe even take a lead. And then it will just, fire you up a little bit more to just give it a little more in that game.
And, Canadians have lacked a consistent goal scorer every year. And if you look around, whether it's Ovechkin, every post-game statistics show up and he's on the score sheet that he made the difference in one way or another. And that's something that is kind of lacking with the Canadians. When you look at the final tally, you go, oh, he didn't get much done this evening when we really needed it. So I think that's a big critical point for the Canadians, that they're kind of lacking to advance real deep, going forward.
I mean, Brendan Gallagher gets his 30 goals, but the 30 goals combined travel about 60 feet. It's all banging in, and galley goals, as I call them. They don't have that sniper, that guy who can just score from anywhere in the offensive zone. Well, Josh Anderson might be the guy, as I mentioned earlier.
Let's hope.
That's a lot of praise for Josh Anderson on this week's episode. One guy we also need to talk about is Alexander Romanov, the rookie defenseman making his NHL debut against the Toronto Maple Leafs. He plays over 20 minutes. I think only Shea Weber and Jeff Petrie played more minutes. And he gets his first NHL assist on a nice outlet pass to Thomas Tatar. He looked really good in that first game, but remember, there's still 55 more to go. How do you feel his adjustment will be to the NHL? What other difficulties could he still encounter as he gets through his rookie season?
He's not a rookie, is he?
Didn't look like one.
Quite impressive in my books. There's a kid that stepped in, showed incredible poise, excellent passer, skater, very intelligent player. If anything, he might struggle a little bit maybe with his language, but that was an issue with Markov back in the day. I remember trying to communicate to him, and he looked at me like I had two heads. But one thing will remain the same: when you have that type of skill and composure at an early age, there's nothing but great things to see from this kid. He never throws the puck away under pressure. His first passes are outstanding. We saw him, thread that one up the middle for the breakaway. Nothing but real good, talent with this individual at such a young age. So that's a huge bonus for the Montreal Canadiens.
His debut reminded me of PK Subban's debut in a way. Just the confidence. Remember when PK first came up and he just played with that confidence, and you don't see that in a lot of young defensemen where it always seems so nervous. Romanov, remember one play on the power play, he had the puck all alone at the blue line, and he was sort of dangling a bit. I'm sure Claude Julien was going, oh my, but just the confidence that he played with. And as you mentioned that pass, the breakaway pass at the Tatar was a beautiful pass. I know watching him at training camp, the first thing that struck me is how big the kid is and how well he moves on his skates. Training camp is one thing, a game is another thing. We saw the game last night, and the kid looked, as Rick said, is he really a rookie? It was a really impressive debut. And the fact that Claude Julien has so much confidence in him, I think he was third on the team in ice time last night behind Weber and Petrie. Played shorthanded, played on the power play. And the power play unit he's on there with four forwards. He's the only defenseman on the ice. And as Rick Green likes to say, never trust the forward. So obviously Claude Julien trusts Romanov as a rookie to be out there in that position, and also that low, hard shot from the point on the blue line. My favorite Habs defenseman as a kid was Guy Lapointe, and I remember that low, hard shot that Guy Lapointe had, and Romanov has a similar type of shot, which is really effective on the power play.
And I think much like Josh Anderson, I think Romanov kind of had something to prove in this first game as well. He's a player that Habs fans have heard so much about, but haven't seen played before. And I think if he went down and had a bad game, people might start to jump on him early that he was overhyped. But he came out, had a great game, and I'm sure this will only help him going forward, having those kind of minutes and knowing that the coaching staff already has this much confidence in you just after one game.
The other thing that's really going to help him is having Luke Richardson as a coach. I think Luke Richardson's impact on this Canadiens team is really underrated. He's calm, he's cool, he's collected. Jeff Petrie told me last season that he never yells at guys. And I go back to PK Subban. You wonder how much better PK Subban would have been if he had Luke Richardson as his assistant coach at the time. So I think Luke Richardson's a perfect guy to handle a young rookie like this getting into the league. If he does make a mistake, Luke Richardson's not going to yell at him when he gets back at the bench. He's just going to give him, encourage him. And then the next day in video session, he'll point out little mistakes that he made. So I think that's really important for a young defenseman to keep that confidence that he showed in his debut.
And I think you get a good read after, on a young defenseman like Romanov, when you see the type of plays that he makes under pressure. That's a real key point when you see a kid stepping into the NHL, and then ones that continue to throw the puck away or make, hope plays, as we used to call them. This kid seems to know and understand, okay, what are my options? I'm going to pick the right option, and the puck is moving forward quickly and on the stick, and very impressive.
So we spent time in this episode talking about Josh Anderson. We spent time talking about Alexander Romanov. I'm sure we thought about Nick Suzuki as well. He scored Wednesday night. But you know who did really well? He got 3 assists in that game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Jonathan Drouin. And I know there are fans who are going to think of the play he did where he tried to make the pass behind the net that ended up going off a ref and then to Jimmy Vesey, who ended up tying the game. But Jonathan Drouin played pretty well on Wednesday night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I guess that's my 2 cents, but people need to remember that. But the fact that so many people, still kind of railed on him for the mistake that he made, I mean, was really unlucky more than anything. That leads me to think that maybe the patience has really worn thin with the fans here in Montreal. So I ask you all, is this season a make or break year for Jonathan Drouin?
Well, to go back to Rick's never trust the forward, that was a bad bounce, that goal, but it was also a pretty soft, blind backhand pass behind his own net that hit the ref. And about 5 minutes before that, he made a dangerous cross-ice pass in his own zone that almost got picked off. So Jonathan Drouin is a threat at both ends of the ice. Is there pressure on him? Yeah, there is. I mean, he's 25 years old. He's not a kid anymore. But I think him playing with Nick Suzuki, they had that chemistry in the postseason last year. It's continued. Josh Anderson is only going to add to that. But Jonathan Drouin just needs to play harder in his own end and make smarter decisions. And that's been his story for a long time. And hopefully for him this season, you can correct that.
I think, from the moment he got traded to Montreal, we knew the patience for this player was going to be very short, especially being a local player. He was one of those players that has all the talent in the world, but he doesn't necessarily have the work ethic to go with it. He did have a good performance Wednesday night against the Leafs, but it is too bad that the deflection off the ref ended up helping the Toronto Maple Leafs to score the equalizer there. But I think that's just how Jonathan Drouin is, that if he doesn't play 100% and doesn't make the smart decisions, he's going to be one of the players that people are going to criticize more than anyone else. And that's just part of the thing of being the local player playing for the local team and underperforming up to this point.
And let's hope that he's going to understand that he's been put in a situation on a line with Anderson and Suzuki that sets him up for success. It should be success for him, and he has to figure it out real quick that he is supposed to be an offensive gifted player that's supposed to make things happen each and every night. Well, he's got some pretty good guys on each on his line, so let's get it done.
Man, did Nick Suzuki play well last night in his own end also. What a solid 200-foot hockey player. He made some key plays deep in his own end, including one in the last minute of regulation time, where there's a loose puck in front of the net. He picked it up and he skated out of the zone himself, like a veteran center. So
just want to reiterate for everyone at home, Jonathan Drouin had 3 assists on Wednesday, including 2 primary assists. I just want to reiterate that because you're right. The patience is worn thin with Drouin, but we have to remember he at least got a good start and is on a line that could be very dangerous. I could go on Jonathan Drouin all day. I don't have the time to do that. And I know we're running out of time here for this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out. Really good job by everyone this week. Looking forward again to talking again with you all next week. If you have a question, I'm talking to you viewers at home, that you'd like to see us discuss, please add it in the comments below and visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out our full episode and join the discussion in the comments section below.